to Real Estate Live, day 2 here at Real Estate Live. We're delighted you're joining us this morning and welcome to our first session of today, our UK and London keynote, which is all about keeping London building. And we're delighted to have a great panel with us, so I'm going to introduce you to shortly. And as I say, this is day 2 of 5 days of events that aims to bring the whole sector together to start talking. And what great timing with the announcements last night about how we may well all be returning to some sort of normal in the not too distant future. We do have a light at the end of this seemingly quite long tunnel to aim towards. So the timing of this conversation this morning is very apt, given everything we've all been through, what the sector, the housing sector has been through, the construction sector. What are the next few months going to look like? And more importantly, how are we going to get London back, building more collaboratively together, private public sector collaborations in a more sustainable way? How are we going to ensure that those affordable housing and those wider housing targets are met? And what's the impact been of the last 18 months of the pandemic? So thank you all for joining us this morning. Just to remind you that we do want to hear from you and we want you to interact with us. So do please put your questions in the questions and answer button on your screen, and we'll try and put those questions to our panels as we go through the next hour. This session is brought to you today in conjunction with London Square, and we're very grateful to them for their support of this session, as they have supported it in previous times as well. Now, just before we go on, I am going to ask you to take part in a short poll, which will come up on your screens. We would like to hear what your view is. What will be the most significant trend for regeneration professionals in 2021? If you could just take a few seconds to tell us your thoughts on that. We're running this poll at the beginning of every session, and we'll be able to share the results at the end of the week. So whilst you're doing that, I'll just tell you who my panelists are this morning. As I say, we are here courtesy of London Square, so very shortly I'll be introducing you to Darren Nathan, a Partnership Director at London Square. We're also delighted to have the Deputy Mayor of London for Housing, Tom Copley, with us, Barbara Brownlee, who is Managing Director of Westminster Build, and she'll be talking to us about what Westminster are doing, but more importantly, what local authorities should be doing, how they should be collaborating. And the man that knows the most about collaboration, whether it be public-private sector, public-public collaborations, joint ventures, delighted that Richard Jones from Arcadis is here to give us his views and expertise on what we should and shouldn't be doing moving forward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Darren Nathan. Tell us a little bit about, set the scene for us.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks everyone who's looking in, and special thanks to Tom, Barbara and Richard for joining in this part of the conversation as well. You know, anyone who doesn't know London Square, we're a house builder that was founded in 2010, delivering homes across London and the South East. Over the last 11 years, I think our growth has been meteoric, and we've continued growing. Our activity and investment over the last year has been an evidence of our ambition and our desire to continue building homes and communities that people want to live in and live around. Alongside our development team, of course, we've got London Square Works and London Square Partners, and that's really what the conversation is for me today. However, in the last couple of months, we also announced the launch of our for-profit RP Square Roots. Frankly, I think we're positive disruptors and innovators in the market. And the construction market. We've got our developments in Bermondsey and Staines. We've got partnerships with Peabody and Clarion, and of course more recently London Borough of Waltham Forest at the Lea Bridge Station sites. It's a really exciting time. My view, and something that was really important I think for today's session, is that when you look at British GDP, construction is the most active component part of that at the moment, and we need to deliver more. We need to carry on building, because it's more than homes. It's jobs, it's finance to support local economy, it's supporting communities, it's creating new activity at ground floors as well as in the homes above. So the crux is public and private sectors embracing more than we have been. We can deliver some really exciting solutions. I think it's now time that everyone has to think about how to bring opportunities forward. I recall just under a year ago, Claire Coggle of Waltham Forest talking about how she wanted the borough to build its way out of the pandemic. And here we are a year later, an announcement last night that actually talks about some positivity where we can finally see a pathway beyond COVID and dealing with things to build more homes. And now is a time to create efficiency. Let's make sure that working together, and the panel today is perfect to talk about it, we start to move on, get the process going, speed up the process, and frankly, let's get building.
Fantastic. Thank you, Darren. Let's bring Tom in. Hi, Tom. Thanks for joining us this morning. Talk to us about where you're coming from, affordable housing, the London plan, all of that. How does all this fit in, and what's your ambitions for the next few months?
Well, thank you. Great to be able to join you, and just apologies in advance for having to leave slightly early at 10:15 today. So if I disappear suddenly, that's why. So I actually started 11 in this role 11 months ago today, just as we were going into lockdown. And one of the first things that we did at City Hall in our housing and land team, I set up a task force to think about our recovery from the pandemic, because it was quite clear that it was going to have an impact on our ambitions to deliver housing in London. And this task force brought together all the key players from public sector, private sector, RPs, trade unions, right across the board. And we recommended a £3.5 billion recovery package to help the sector get through. Unfortunately, the Chancellor didn't take us up on that particular recommendation, but an awful lot of work went into that report. There were an awful lot of recommendations in there beyond that, which I think were very useful for the sector. And of course, our priority, particularly at City Hall, is making sure that London is building the affordable homes that we need. When we were going into the pandemic, we'd actually had a record year of affordable house building. So 17,000, more than 17,000 starts funded through the Mayor's Affordable Homes Programme, which is the most since the GLA began keeping records in 2003. And now we've negotiated another affordable homes programme. The two are going to run concurrently for 2 years. Unfortunately, it's not anywhere near the level that we would like. London only got a £4 billion share over 5 years. And to put that into context, if we're going to build at the level that we need, we actually need £4.9 billion a year if we're going to get up to the kind of numbers that our data show would actually satisfy the need for affordable housing in London. But what we are doing through this new programme is really driving forward standards around design, sustainability, quality, all of these things. A lot of the policies on this that are in the London plan are being integrated into our new affordable homes programme as conditions of funding, and also things around equality, diversity and inclusion as well. And on the London plan itself, of course, now that's finally been adopted, which we're pleased about, but it shouldn't have taken more than a year for the Secretary of State to sign that off. I mean, it's within his right to do that, but it's not really, in my view, within the spirit of the devolution settlement that we've got. And it was, I think, creating unnecessary uncertainty. That said, I think the plan was already having an impact. Certainly, the affordability and viability supplementary planning guidance has been driving up the affordable housing we're seeing on the big referable schemes that come across the Mayor's desk. So from around 25% under the previous Mayor up to 37% last year, which is, I think a big achievement. And the final thing I want to say, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Barbara has to say from a sort of council side, we're seeing now, I think, the beginning of a bit of a renaissance in council house building. More council homes were started last year, more than 4,100 than any year since 1983. And a lot of those were supported through our Building Council Homes for Londoners programme. And I think the role that councils can be taking, an expanded role, is really, really exciting. When you think where councils were 10 years ago, almost none of them really were building, certainly not any scale. Now that's completely changed. They're really becoming significant players in the market. And we want to make sure that we support that to continue. I mean, just over the last few weeks, in 2 boroughs alone, Barking and Dagenham approved 500 council homes across 2 schemes. Brent approved around 300 council homes across two schemes. That's just 2 boroughs. These are big numbers. And we want to support ambitious councils to become big players in the market once again.
Great, thanks, Tom. So over to you then, Barbara. A Westminster build, obviously Westminster in a great position. Not every council at the moment is in such a great position. And there are some challenges out there for local authorities that obviously had to spend lots of money in areas they weren't anticipating. So tell us a little bit about where Westminster are and what your views are.
Okay, thanks very much, Catherine. Well, Westminster Builds was not born. It was born after long deliberation by Westminster City Council, which is an incredibly ambitious affordable house building council. So 3 years ago, Westminster City Council set out its plan to build 2,000 affordable homes in 5 years in the borough boundary, and is well on its way to delivering that commitment. And in delivering it, did a lot of work to look at the type of housing there was in Westminster and the type of housing people needed, and the people who worked in Westminster and where they came into the borough from and where they lived in the southeast generally. And out of all that work, a couple of things, right? Very stark facts. The average house price in Westminster, £1 million, the average rent, £500 a week. Totally unaffordable by any level of average worker. So, and the borough, 25% council housing. So this huge gap of any level of affordable housing that an average working family might be able to access in the borough. So the council started looking at that, and that gap you would normally find filled by RPs, right? Affordable housing, sub-market, that type of thing. It's an RP product historically. In Westminster, RPs were not filling that gap, understandably, because they could build 5 houses for any one they could ever build in the city. So the council realised it had to fill that gap itself and set up Westminster Builds, which is now tasked with delivering all 10 years of housing, all 10 years completely. Council housing it will build, but it will build and give back to the council to manage. Obviously, it's, you know, HRA built council housing on council housing land. But Westminster Builds will fill that gap between the incredibly expensive products in Westminster and council housing. Having started 3 years ago, we have also now learned that the other thing that Westminster Builds can do incredibly well is pick up failed developments and operate in a counter-cyclical market, which is exactly, I think, what both Tom and Darren were talking about. We had 2 JVs inside the borough itself, which stalled because there was fears about the funding was withdrawn, fears about sales prices in the centre of London in the last, couple of years. And Westminster Builds stepped in and became the partner to the private sector developer, funding and taking sales risks on those JVs. And now there are 2 sites which are delivering full Section 106 commitments, plus a range of other tenures from commercial sale right through to sub-market rent. And it's Westminster Builds has unlocked those stalled sites, which otherwise would just have hoarding up for the next 5 years, while the market decided whether or not it was prepared to take the risk on central London sites. So hugely important, I think, local authority companies and councils, as Tom said, to build out in difficult times. 7% of GDP is development. We need to keep that industry going throughout the next 10 years without break or fail. And the people to do that are local authorities. And the way they do it is through local authority housing companies. It enables them to deliver in a broader way across their boundaries and different tenures. I think the last thing I would say about Westminster Builds in this context is for Westminster, it's really important to keep house building going in the southeast. It's not a Westminster thing. The people who work in Westminster come from all over London and all over the southeast. And to keep the economic engine moving in Westminster, we need really high quality, sustainable, beautiful, affordable housing delivered in every London borough and in the southeast generally on commuting routes. Now, as Tom said, many London boroughs are absolutely delivering that now with great speed and great skill, but that's not true across the whole picture. And where some boroughs perhaps don't have resources or expertise or the desire to deliver themselves, Westminster Builds would like to step in and create a public-public partnership with another borough to ensure that their housing numbers were delivered. This is not about Section 106 housing. That clearly and always and only will ever belong to the borough that owns the land and wants to deliver it. But the other side of the development, the commercial development, Westminster Builds will step in and attempt to make some of that sub-commercial and more affordable. So a real range of products that can be developed. We'll work with the private sector, we'll work with local authorities, and our huge, ambitious programme of another 2,000 homes within 10 years on top of the original 2,000 Westminster committed to, will be delivered both in and out of the borough, but across London and in the southeast generally. So I think that's probably it from me.
Thank you, Barbara. So good time to bring in Richard. So Richard, over many years, you know all about collaborations, joint ventures, and I guess the question, given what Barbara's saying, you know, how different is it now? How has the pandemic affected the requirement to do these ventures, and do you think they're going to look differently as we move forward? And are they going to work? Are these public-public collaborations going to work?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, what I'd like to do is talk a bit generically around partnerships and collaborative working, and perhaps just sort of show how they're beginning to impact on delivery of housing and what that means. So through Arcadis, we're currently working on over 65 partnerships or joint venture arrangements, generally between private and public sectors, but not exclusively. So there are a number of public and there's a number of private partnerships within that. And just to give that a little bit of context, that relates to probably somewhere in the region of 65,000 homes and about 18 billion pounds worth of construction work. So it's already having a massive impact. And I suppose if you go back, if you look back to the early 2000s, there was a lot of talk about partnering and collaboration through the likes of Egan and Latham at that time. But that didn't really translate into the residential sector. In fact, back then, what we found was that the contractual relationship was becoming a lot more adversarial in residential between clients and contracting. So it was only in 2008 when we had the financial crash that created the catalyst for real change. And particularly for the house builders and housing associations, market conditions meant that there was an imperative to work more collaboratively for the key stakeholders in residential development. So initially this translated into a lot more transparency from the house builders in particular, who really for the first time were willing to share their commercial business models, which they would never have done before that. In turn, that transparency led to an alignment of interest. Organisations were able to understand the business drivers of their potential partners and align them to their own. So that became a step change in terms of the way in which we could engage. And this transparency and alignment that then led to an engagement model that was a lot more efficient and effective in managing risk. The trust and understanding brought about by the model enabled the management of risk to sit with the most appropriate partner and therefore be mitigated in the most efficient way. So all of a sudden you began to see the benefits of this, and it led to sort of demonstrably equitable arrangements, which in turn incentivize organisations to perform to the best of their ability within that joint venture arrangement. So suddenly it all became about the carrot rather than the stick in terms of the way in which organisations were working together. So these types of arrangements have grown significantly over the last few years, and we're set up correctly to capture the characteristics I've just talked about. They've been very successful, and I've no doubt they've been responsible for delivering more housing than would otherwise be achieved. However, as the popularity grows, there are some watch-outs. It's not good enough to just assume that working with another organisation will automatically be beneficial. There needs to be a clear understanding from the outset what added benefits, the added benefits are for the two organisations working together, particularly on a specific opportunity. And although that sounds pretty obvious, you'll be surprised to hear how many times two potential partners have been thrown together by default rather than design. And that creates an unbalanced sort of joint venture. Organisations that want to reap the benefits of joint venture working must work on their collaborative competencies. Some of these, the sort of hard skills, are process driven, such as joint governance, creating business plans and setting business objectives. However, just as importantly are the soft skills, including management by influence, consensus building, resolution of conflict in ways that result in win-win outcomes, and harnessing differences in outlook to create innovation. So when considering the potential benefit, attention should be given to the cultural fit of the two organisations, the blend of different skill sets within the organisations, the particular drivers of the individual business models and how they can be aligned, as well as the individual personalities involved. So ensuring there's a proper balance within the partnership will in turn mitigate the potential for disagreement. We are seeing many successful joint ventures now as the model embeds. However, it should be remembered that this success will be significantly improved when considered against a programme of works rather than just a one-off transaction. So it's a lot more strategic in terms of its thinking. As I've said, there's lots of examples of successful joint ventures, and therefore the industry should be able to learn from that. So actually look at where the success is and begin to get that more widely understood. Probably the most important success factor is that of a collaborative mindset, is the attitude and mental approach that fosters greater collaboration and underpins successful partnership. It embraces open, honest and transparent communication. It leads with trust. It identifies differences as opportunities to create value, and it seeks reciprocation. When you win, I win. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That collaborative mindset is something I think that, you know, the pandemic has definitely encouraged, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Back in here, Darren, the impact of what's happened over the last year and the way people are thinking differently, having time to stop and think about how to do things differently is definitely something that we're all going to hold on to, aren't we? And learn from.
Yeah, look, I you know me, Catherine, I'm always glass half full. I'm always looking at the opportunity. I think we've learned so much from the bad news that's happened over the last 12 months, and we've experienced something that we would never ever want to experience again. However, if you look at what we've learned to do, even what you're doing today with the platform that you've produced with Real Estate Live, what we have learned to do is to keep going. And I go back, when I think back a year and the change, I think it's quite incredible. A year ago, government supported construction by saying it wanted construction sites to get back going. It extended working hours to make sure we carry on building. So it touched on what Tom was saying about delivering affordable housing, because as developers and house builders, we've carried on delivering the affordable housing program that are formed part of our schemes. We've also carried on and continue to build the new homes that have been supported by the stamp duty holiday. I think there's a lot that's happened that we have to reflect on from the last year that has been positive. And actually, let's embrace the change that we've learned to adopt over the last 12 months. But please, let's, as soon as we can, get back to meeting in rooms, meeting around coffee tables and doing business across the table and not across a glass screen.
Well, June 21st, let's hold on to that date for now. That's probably our best option at the moment, but let's wait and see if that happens. And I want to bring in a question that we've had from Audley, who's watching us this morning. It's about today's news headlines about MMC slow to take off despite worries over materials and labour. How do you encourage MMC JV's uptake, as 25% of the GLA affordable housing programme will have to be delivered by MMC? Tom, do you want to come in on this one?
Well, this is one area where we and the government are actually really aligned. There is a joint ambition to promote MMC, and it is quite an ambitious target within the new programme, but I think it's for us to try and drive this forward. And I think that we're doing ongoing work in the GLA on this at the moment. We think that there's big scope for demand aggregation, and the new affordable homes programme encourages this. And, you know, we're thinking, you know, creatively as well. Are there ways that GLA, perhaps in partnership with boroughs, could support something like a MMC factory or logistics plant or something like that? which not only would help to you know, with our collective ambitions around house building, it would also help to generate jobs as well. So there's a lot of thinking going on around this. It's really exciting. I think that the challenge is this point about making sure you've got a steady pipeline of demand, and that's where I think you know, if boroughs in particular can come together and collaborate, we can create that pipeline, but also making sure there is some nervousness as well, because unless there's more standardization, there's all sorts, you know, MMC can range from, you know, very sort of minor things to sort of, you know, full modular. But there's always the fear, if you go for a particular system, if that business then goes bust, you're going to be left high and dry. And that's where I think there's a role for us here and the boroughs collectively to try and drive forward some of that standardization to help the sector.
Barbara, do you want to come in here from Westminster's point of view?
Yes, just I think that was really interesting. I mean, obviously Tom's hit the nail on the head, entirely of the difficulties, the hurdles we have to get over. And I was just thinking, there is the first partnership being set up now, it kind of around North and East London, or at boroughs around MMC. And it actually reminded me that the local housing companies are coming together as a partnership in London, because they are, you know, and I'm sure, you know, Croydon will come up, but they are a strong delivery set of vehicles for local authorities. I mean, that's what they are. They're local authorities' delivery vehicles. So the local authorities are in charge of them completely, but they are the delivery arm. And they are getting together, and we are looking at, you know, and I think the GLA prospectus is incredibly helpful, that it goes from bathroom pods, you know, to the whole SIP panel, you know, concrete pour, whatever, the whole range of MMC. But we are looking at local housing companies. Is there anything we could do jointly, you know, together with our programs to try and pick out something from the MMC market? So I just think it is that point. It's going to be cross-borough. It's going to be bigger. It doesn't work on a small patch. It doesn't work in a tiny little estate easily. Yeah, we need to join up.
Can I just jump back in, sorry, there on that? And Barbara's absolutely right. And in East London is a good example. I mean, Be First, which is the Barking and Dagenham council-owned housing company, they're really trying to drive forward MMC, and I'm sure would welcome opportunities to collaborate with more boroughs.
Yeah, we're talking to them.
Okay, Darren, from a house builder perspective, how would you?
Yeah, over the last 12 months, our business has definitely changed. First of all, we love brick. We love natural materials. We think brick is beautiful, and we'll carry on using brick. However, there are lots of systems now, and Tom touched on some. I think that comment actually from Tom, that there is a broad range, MMC, which is a phrase that's been around for, I don't know, 30, 40 years and frightening to still be using. Actually, there's a broad range that doesn't necessarily mean modular, and therefore there's lots that we can do. And actually, what we're finding and what we believe is that by using more products that are MMC, which are built off-site and delivered and then installed, we think we can improve quality of the build, reduce defects, and most importantly, and I think this is really important for the councils, the local authorities and the housing associations, we can reduce the FM. The cost of maintenance will reduce if there's less defects. And we have to embrace that, especially. We've got to think about how we can use that more and more, whether it's on a concrete frame, the windows that we're using. And, you know, there was an announcement this morning that Tesla, as an electric car, have started to bring down the cost of their cars now that their production line is increasing. And the more that we increase the production line of MMC products, the cost can start to come down, and it will be more cost efficient, more energy efficient. And again, I can't reiterate enough, less defects.
So this whole you know, sustainability, driving more efficient housing will obviously be part of this. Richard, from your point of view, is there any, you know, can you give us any evidence of where this is working well at the moment with your collaborations?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, with MMC, there's a requirement for investment, and that's the big issue. Historically, MMC has been delivered through small companies that actually can't invest more in growing their production lines because they haven't had the demand there. So Tom's point in terms of demand becomes the key part. If you can get certainty of demand, you can bring investment in and it begins to expand the model. But I think there are a number of other barriers to it as well, and I think it needs intervention by government in certain ways in terms of it. But transparency is a key thing at the moment, because a lot of clients look at being able to use MMC, but actually trying to get a handle on actually what it's going to cost you becomes very, very difficult, because it becomes a hybrid solution with some on-site works and some modular works, and then depending on what system you're using depends on what the way in which that cost looks. So that's been, you know, people like Lango Rooks have been promoting MMC for a long period of time, and have you know, are moving that agenda forward, but it's taken a long struggle. But I do think the point that was being made, there is an opportunity now with the collaboration that we're talking about in terms of the GLA, the local authorities getting together. There are organisations out there that are creating platforms that will allow those sort of organisations to invest, the public organisations to invest in their own factories that could then begin to support this agenda. And it's going to take some pretty imaginative thinking in terms of how you bring this to play, and it's going to be a challenge to the public sector to actually do something that is very, very different to what they historically have done. But I think the opportunity is there, and it's a great opportunity.
From the GLA's perspective, what more support are you looking at in this area to try and bring your London boroughs together? What's currently happening? What more could be done to try and make this work?
Well, we're keen to support the things that you've already heard and that Barbara has mentioned, more cross-borough collaboration and looking what we can do in that space. And there's, yeah, as I say, some ongoing work at the moment, which you know, we hope will lead to some more activity by the GLA in this space sort of over the coming months.
Okay, great. I've got a question in from Bob, who's wondering where the panel sees the requirements to combat climate change sits alongside all of this. Higher capital costs now, but rising benefits over a long lifespan. You're nodding, Barbara, which means that you probably have an opinion here.
Well, I think it's, you know, the most important in a pay agenda. It's not ignorable in any way. Zero net carbon building is an aim. It's an extraordinarily ambitious aim for, I would say, almost every local authority stated publicly now in London. And, you know, even how we measure that exactly is not agreed, but there are some huge steps to get that are agreed. In particular, in Westminster, we are building out an estate regeneration, Ebury Bridge Estate, which is going to be our first real attempt at as close to net zero carbon as we can get. It's being built with fabulously sustainable heating, cooling methods, all energy. And, you know, all those things, like every single bit of demolition rubble on site, kept on site, reused again, trying to reduce traffic flow, trying to reduce waste, trying to reduce the use of building materials. So across every aspect being looked at on that estate, both from the building side and the kind of softer side, how people live in those homes, how people use those homes, what transport they have. Clearly that's simpler if you're building in the middle of Westminster than if you're building on the outer edge. But all of that being considered together, and it takes a lot of energy, and we're all learning. I don't think anybody yet has, you know, any perfect solution. We're learning as we go. One of the things I would say is there is absolutely no doubt a massive financial premium for bringing in a contractor on a kind of net zero carbon build, so a passive house style type standard of building. Because building to that type, building to those standards is ferociously difficult. It's incredibly difficult and hardly been done yet. I mean, clearly there's stuff going on in Camden that we all watch, and we watch some of it go up and be unpicked and be done again. But you know, that's good. It is about learning, but it's an incredibly expensive way to build. And that, I think, is the big issue, and it's where the question's coming from, isn't it? You know, he's right, you're right, invest more now, potentially huge benefits in the future, but where do we get that money to invest, and how is that calculated in viability studies, and you know, how do developers cope with that? There's big financial questions that are just hard-edged, clear, and need answering. You know, this agenda is not wishy-washy, green, airy-fairy. This is hard and expensive, and we need to deliver it, and we need some upfront funding to deliver it. That's where I'd come from.
Darren, I'm going to bring you in as a developer. How are you tackling this?
Well, firstly, let me say I am absolutely delighted to hear Barbara's honesty, however brutal that honesty may actually be. Everything is a function of cost. We all accept that there is an important approach to this carbon-free environment that we're targeting, and that is targeted government. However, if I were to go to our estimating team and show them some of the things that we need to include within the costs, they would come back and say, where's the money coming from to pay for it? You know, the function of a development is you've got your cost, you've got your revenue, you've got a profit margin, and they're always tight anyway. And that's how you arrive at your land value. So if I'm going to a public authority that is trying to achieve best value for money and thinks that that's price, I'm sorry, value for money isn't about price. Value for money is about how we build safely, how we build better, how we build these more energy efficient and sustainable solutions within which come at a cost, and how we create better futures for the people that are going to live in those homes. And Barbara touches on passive house. I have not at London Square, but previously been involved in 2 projects, one which was certified passive house, and one was built to passive house standards. Now, the cost of building those buildings was always over budget, and that was never really allowed for because people hadn't experienced it. However, the people living in those homes, wow, did they see a reduction in the cost of their fuel bills, and see how the efficiency was being delivered. And as I'll go back to where I started, if every local authority could take Barbara's very honest approach and understand that the cost is excessive, and we have to find a way of factoring that into the appraisals and making the things work, then we come to answer the question and build those environments that the question was exactly about.
Okay, I'm going to ask Tom. I'm conscious, Tom, that you're only with us for a few more moments. It seems a good time to invite you back in just on this point before you have to leave us, particularly, I guess, because of Barbara's honesty. She's basically saying, obviously, we all want to do it. We understand the importance. We need some help. We need some money. How is it going to work in reality?
I think it is challenging, but look, we've got to make sure that we're not just churning out units. It's really important that we're building homes that are sustainable, high quality, well designed, and crucially, and particularly after, you know, in the current context, safe. And in, you know, I think we've seen, you know, very clearly in recent years the fault, you know, not just the what happens when corners are cut and we don't build homes to a very, very high standard, and the absolutely tragic and appalling effects of that, and the huge cost, not just to the people affected, but also, of course, now the huge cost in terms of making buildings safe. So yeah, that's in a sort of broader context. In terms of sustainability, I think that we need to lead by example, particularly in the public sector. In our new affordable homes programme, as I mentioned earlier, we've got new standards, and this includes new standards around sustainability. So developments needing to be net zero carbon, at least air quality neutral, to support biodiversity and urban greening. And so, you know, we're sort of bringing this in, you know, through our affordable homes programme as conditions of funding in order to ensure that our partners, whether they be RPs or boroughs, are taking a sort of strong lead on this.
Okay, thank you for that. Just before you leave, I'm just going to read this one out. It's a tongue-in-cheek, and it's from someone who's anonymous, so clearly they don't want to be known. But why waste money on building cycle routes, which only a small proportion of people can use? Very, very topical and hot potato subject. Building green pavements on public highways, when all these bits of cash can be applied to better use, like contributing to building homes, maybe joined up thinking and common sense. Well, this session is about joined up thinking, and obviously there's a lot more to it than that, I'm sure, and that is clearly tongue in cheek. But Richard, just wanting to bring you back in here because, you know, clearly this is a really good example, isn't it? I mean, everyone's got an opinion. There's a myriad of people with different priorities, but I guess the role that perhaps you play at Arcadis sometimes is to try and gel all this together and make it work. Would that be right?
Yeah, and I suppose again it's about creating a different mindset, and the different mindset is around how you link a capex budget with an opex budget, because those two things are beginning to play in. And I suppose the lead that so by that I mean a capital budget and an operating budget. So if I'm going to create a product that I can operate more efficiently, effectively, and more cheaply, how do I translate that into being able to pay more for the capital cost of that in the first place? And of course, what the way you do that, the lead must be taken probably from those asset owning organisations, the local authorities and the housing associations that all own these products for a long period of time, and therefore how that translates. The problem is those whole life costings, we're not yet sophisticated enough to really use the data and information we have around that to translate that into maybe a subsidy that you could apply to the capital cost at the beginning of a building. So I think there needs to be, it's beginning to happen. I think what you're seeing, particularly now where you've got things like build to rent having an impact. So where these organisations are developing to create products that they're going to own, all of a sudden there becomes a bigger imperative to understand how your operating budget aligns with your capital budget, which is what, to be quite honest, things like the hotel sector have done for years, or for many years. That's the way they operate. Their whole capital budget is dictated by the way in which they're going to operate and manage a particular product. So I think we're right at the beginning of this, and I think there is another real opportunity to change the way we think and to really begin to drive this agenda in a different way.
Thank you. Tom, very conscious we're literally a couple of minutes away. Is there any last thing you want to add before you have to leave us this morning?
Well, I just want to say on that point about cycle lanes, I mean, I think anyone who's tried to cycle on London's unsegregated roads, I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted. And if we want people to travel, to walk and cycle, active travel, I think we do need to be investing in cycle infrastructure, as well as all the things that we need to be doing on the construction side as well, in order to ensure that we can save the planet.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us. We do appreciate it. We'll see you soon. All the best. Thank you. We've got some questions around retrofitting and you know, the whole issue of that and carbon and everything else. And obviously there's lots in the news. And in fact, this week on other sessions, we will be talking about, you know, housing, retrofitting of retail into housing and all the other things that are out there. And what does that look like? Is this something, Barbara, that you're looking at in Westminster Builds?
Westminster Builds, no. The council, like all councils, yes. Clearly, and it kind of takes us back to a comment that was made right at the beginning for me. The retrofit agenda and the fire safety agenda are so huge and so expensive in London at the moment, both of them, for RPs and councils. It's one of the reasons where I think it was probably Tom came in and said the delivery of housing, new housing, therefore, is more with local authority delivery, housing companies, than it is with RPs, because they just are, their business plans currently are so incredibly heavily weighted towards both retrofit and fire safety, that the headroom for them to develop is less and less and less. Yeah. So yes, Westminster, you know, so that I would say Westminster Builds is not in the retrofit business, but Westminster City Council certainly is, and the housing team and the for our own. Oh,
that's an interesting noise.
was an interesting noise. I don't know if that was me. It was with its own 20,000 units, is currently looking at retrofitting across the piece at great expense, but has to take that agenda very seriously.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Regarding building back better, and that's a bit of a cliched phrase now that not perhaps as popular, but and actually it's interesting that we have someone talking about physical activity and fitness, and I guess this sort of goes back to that cycling, and I know Darren, you're a keen cyclist, so clearly you're going to be in favour of those cycle routes. But I guess what the pandemic has shown us over the last year is it's opened up the opportunities, and for many people getting outside, enjoying and appreciating the great outdoors, whether that be cycling, running, walking, but just generally appreciating that there is a great outdoors to enjoy. That's probably one of the benefits that's come out of the last year for many, many people. And this clearly is going to be a factor, I imagine, moving forward in any plans that are being made in terms of residential housing, affordable or whatever provision. Is this a different sort of mindset? Is this making you down when you're looking at future developments?
Oh, first of all, let's cast aside my love of cycling for a moment, because I've been on some cycling lanes around Hertfordshire where they're not being maintained, not being cleaned. However, I belie anyone who doesn't feel that development is more than just about bricks and mortar and the building that goes up, and actually the language that building speaks when it's engaging with the pedestrian and the cycle routes and the driver routes. Development on a site actually regenerates an area, even if it's not regeneration. And the opportunity that we've seen over the last year is to understand the real importance to people, if they're living in a 1-bed home or even in a 2-bed home where they've got a family, how important it is that they've got some area to break out, that's where they're going to work from. And when they go out down in their lift or down the stairs to go outside, what is outside for them to engage with? How much have we missed just going into a coffee shop to meet and greet with people and talk to people, whether that's business or friends? And actually those local environments more and more need the activity around the homes that are being built as well. And I maintain development is not just about house building. Delivering new homes is about a whole mixed tenure approach, whether that is the private sale, the affordable housing, which is critical. And Barbara knows, because Barbara, everyone looks at Westminster and thinks about the dark blues on a Monopoly board and Park Lane and Mayfair, but actually Westminster's got some of the most deprived parts of London, if not the country, and Barbara will know the numbers. So actually the delivery is absolutely critical. But we've seen at London Square people who are working from home, have been working from home in the last year, and actually the space environments around them, we have to look in designing better, improving. And as I say, I think this whole idea of having a better engagement of how the building meets the street and how the street meets the community is going to be a big statement of design going forward.
Barbara, do you want to come in?
Well, I mean, where Darren is sort of taking me, I think, is to our big regen sites and Church Street in the north of the borough. I mean, the north of the borough does have, there's substantial differences in health outcomes, income, you know, all of that, although interestingly not in school attainment. So very bright kids in the north of the borough doing very well in very good schools, but other issues. And we have, of course, a huge regeneration scheme there, Church Street, where we are looking to remove some of our worst property, some of the absolutely oldest, most obsolete council property, and make to the extent that we reconnect that area to places that are 10 minutes away. Regent's Park on foot, the canal, 3 minutes on foot, Regent's Canal, St. John's Wood, 15 minutes, lovely little walk. But the big area around Church Street itself entirely cut off because of the design of the council houses in the 60s, which just blocked off every route in and out of that huge estate. So yeah, things like that, Westminster has as much need and is in the middle of delivering as we speak. Huge challenge there. That's where one of Westminster Builds does have a big JV with Link City right in the middle of that estate. And, you know, there's some blocks being emptied as we speak and will come down. So yes, I think Darren's right to talk about the whole issue of, you know, the area the environment, the way it links, the cycling, and can I just say I'm a cyclist? I really, really love all of the new cycle lanes. Great, now in grave danger on our local neighborhood internet group. It is the hottest topic. It is unbelievable. Like some people will kill to keep them, others will kill to get rid of them. I've never seen anything engender such high feelings. But, as a cyclist, two things for me. Cyclists, I want the cycling routes. And as a person whose absolute joy is building beautiful, sustainable homes, right? That's absolutely, designed well by fabulous architects and executed well by good constructors is all I really want to deliver in my life. The other thing I adore is the end result, putting in high quality green spaces. How many times have we all got to the end of our budgets, the end of our scheme, and it's the end of our budgets? And instead of planting trees, you're planting twigs. Yeah, they're just ridiculous. You skimp on all of the landscaping because it's the last thing, and the money's run out. We have a complete commitment in Westminster Builds, which I personally really oversee, that we set aside that budget at the beginning. Because unless we do that final piece of landscaping really well, to the best possible standards, I think all of those developments suffer, absolutely suffer. So that, yeah, I'm completely with you there.
There's a question about tertiary parades. Again, we're going to be discussing this at various points during the week, I'm sure, but someone has asked the question now, and looking at possibly allowing many more to be made residential with the purpose-built spaces they've done in places like Wembley and east of London. I mean, that goes without saying. I'm sure it is a top topic at the moment, and we know that the whole face of the high street retail has changed. Is there something you want to say about that, Bar? I'm sure you're looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, you need Debbie Jackson here, our Executive Director, Growth Planning and Housing, really, to talk about all of the work the council's doing on Oxford Street, for example, animating that space, loosening ground floor frontage uses of that space. So never mind tertiary, I mean, primary retail. We're re-looking at it. We're not suggesting that would become residential. But, if you take a walk around Pimlico or Barnsbury and Canterbury and Islington, very nice areas that work incredibly well, retail has been changed to really beautiful residential in a very proactive fashion for many, many, many years. And I think as long as it's totally controlled and does require permission, and is absolutely subject to, building standards in the same way, and is very carefully planned and discussed locally. It's always going to be a difficult area locally to lose shops and see more residential. So those things are not going to be any easier to tackle than building on any other brownfield site. But I think we can move forward if our standards are high enough and we do it with the people who live locally.
And I guess that's key, isn't it? Because we've only got to look at some bad examples of the conversions of office to resi.
Terrible.
Where there weren't standards, and just a numbers game really of getting some numbers in. Hasn't actually delivered. I mean, Croydon's a good example. A great growth in residential numbers, and I think something like 17 buildings have gone from office to resi. Absolutely needed, but not all the best example of how that retrofitting can be done, and not having to be done to the required standards. So I guess there's lessons to be learnt there for the future. Conscious of time, Richard, just want to bring you back in and just to ask you sort of, I guess looking forward to the next sort of year, 18 months, 3 years, and coming back, I guess, to Darren's challenge, which is set out at the beginning, that actually, local authorities, private sector, got to start delivering. And Barbara's got a solution. She's got Westminster Builds. It's going to step in and take over where things are stalled. What's your sort of final thoughts on this and recommendations? And what do you think the challenges are around this?
Well, look, I think what's happened with the pandemic is it's probably given us all a bit of a chance to sit back and think about the way in which our industry is going to evolve. It's going to change. It's going to change going forward. What I'm seeing, there's a lot more collaboration in our industry, in our sector. People are willing to talk to each other. They are willing to understand how they can work together to try and unlock potential opportunities, and that in itself is quite a mindset change in terms of the way in which our whole sector has worked over, historically over the years. So I think the opportunity to build on that, to really understand how together, private, public sectors can actually work together, blend their skill sets to create a different solution, and also understand that the whole way in which we're going to work, live and play going forward is probably going to be a bit different to what it was a year or so ago, and really understand it. So the people that are going to get this right are the people that are beginning to think about what that new way of living is. It feels like a more caring society to me. I think the one thing this pandemic has done is it's made people think a lot more, made people question, the way they want to live, the way they care for people and everything else. And that's going to translate into the physical products and the places that we're creating in terms of a sector and industry. So I think, we're on the cusp of something very, very exciting here if we get it right. And I think there's likely, there's a big, what was the figure given in one of the manuals the other day, of about £260 billion worth of savings that have been pent up over the last year or so. So as we come out of this, it's not like the financial crash that it took us 15 years to basically unwind it. This is likely to be the minute touch wood, the vaccinations kick in, we're going to be unlocking society, and hopefully it's going to move very quickly. So let's get that right. Let's get on top of that and build on all of the good things that have come out of what has been a pretty dire year, really.
It does feels like there is a really exciting opportunity to think differently, do things differently, act differently, Barbara, to work differently with other local authorities. And we haven't touched upon, some of them, we haven't got time to touch upon, the challenges that, say, Croydon have faced with their brick by brick. But, nevertheless, final few words from you. What is this opportunity, and how is Westminster Builds going to really grasp it over the next 6 months, 12 months?
Okay, thank you for that, Catherine. I think the opportunity is absolutely huge because with a local housing company, you can build any tenure and hold any property in terms of, dealing with sales risk or market rent risk for as long as the company wants. And, that's backed by the local authorities' guarantee and funding. So you don't get much stronger than that. You're right, we haven't touched on Croydon. And, I'm not part of Croydon and would hesitate to say there's obviously a huge array of complicated issues involved in that. But what I would say about Westminster Builds is we are as close to our council as it is physically possible to get. The governance is, clear, transparent. We work through them. We know we only deliver for the council. We follow the council's strategic direction completely. And I think that will give us our strength and stability to move out of Westminster and deliver across the southeast. But we will never forget who our owner is. We're a wholly owned company, one shareholder, Westminster City Council, and that will always guide what we do. So I think that's the way to safe development.
And final word to you, Darren, and I guess a view of today. I mean, there's been some very interesting conversation. What's your final thought?
Look, being very brief and with an eye on the time, I think one thing that we can all take, and hopefully everyone listening does as well, but let's get the message out there. Tom, Barbara, Richard, myself have all been on the same river, rowing in the same direction. We all know that we're on the cusp of a very exciting time in the construction, the housing and the delivery sector. And if we can just grab hold of it, we can't get past the method of procurement because that's enshrined in British law, but we can get going and do as much as we can as quickly as possible. We've always been behind on how many homes we're delivering. And as I say, homes deliver communities, they deliver so much for people. And I'm just grateful that the panel that we've had today and all of us talking have been on the same path. and we're all looking forward.
I think that's really important, isn't it? You know, we've all gone through together, you know, a pretty horrendous year, you know, from a personal, business, whatever perspective, and all rowing together in the same direction to meet the same end goal has got to be the way forward. And I think that this panel has really well demonstrated how that is happening. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Barbara, to Richard, to Darren, and obviously to Tom for taking part in this panel this morning. Hopefully you found it interesting. And I want to encourage you, please, to join the debate on the rest of this week. We're just putting up what's happening today. We're moving straight into a talk about building a sustainable future for Harlow. And I'm sure a lot of what has been discussed here will move over into that, and then more widely looking at sustainable town centres, and then actually moving into agriculture and in partnership with Suffolk, looking at that side of things and what the agricultural revolution might look like. There is loads of things to talk about, and it's really important that we do have these conversations and that we continue to have these conversations, because working together we can all make a difference, and that's what we need to do, and that's what Real Estate Live is all about. So thank you all very much for watching. We're actually bringing Real Estate Live back in June, which interestingly, of course, we just as we all get back to that new normal. So it'll be really interesting to revisit this and see what this is looking like as we open up our doors properly again in June. And you never know, we might actually not be on a Zoom. We may even be able to sit next to each other. But thank you all again. It's been a pleasure hosting this session, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.